Hi everybody, welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. I'm Phil Fatica. Thank you for joining us. We have an extremely heavy hitter load up for you today, and they're all going to be talking about what I'm holding in my hand. I'm going to put on my lapel so you know that we are here today for Pre-K for PA. Talk about heavy hitters. Let me introduce you to our guest. Sitting in the middle is Mr. Nick Scott Jr. Nick is the Vice President of Scott Enterprises. Next to Nick is lawyer Ron DiNicola. Mr. DiNicola and Mr. Scott are co-chairing the Pre-K for PA Northwestern Pennsylvania campaign. We're talking heavy hitters right now. We're talking about shakers and movers and people who get things done. So let's talk about Pre-K for PA. First of all, what is it? When I say Pre-K for PA, a lot of people know about it, but let's start defining what it is and where you hope to take it. We can come back in an hour. I think that's the first question.
Okay.
We got lots. Toss up, go ahead.
Well, the Pre-K for PA campaign is a campaign that is an issues campaign, unlike a traditional political campaign. It is an issues campaign where there's not really a candidate on the ballot or a measure on the ballot, but it is a campaign nevertheless to educate the communities, educate the people of Pennsylvania, in order to create the political will in the state legislature to fully fund pre-K education for 3- and 4-year-olds. It had its genesis in southeastern Pennsylvania when a group of community leaders and businessmen concerned about literacy rates and dropout rates got together and said, hey, look, we need to do something. We need to educate our communities, and we need to move the needle on pre-K education. And the William Penn Foundation came in and said, look, we're willing to fund it under one condition, and that is that you make it a statewide campaign.
Okay, so let's go to Nick. It is a statewide campaign, and you two gentlemen are representing this particular area. There are other people like you all over the state?
There are, yes.
Okay, and I think that my next question is, Erie County, northwestern Pennsylvania, Crawford, Warren County, they're not doing too well with pre-K for PA, or pre-K, right? I mean, that's
well,
a
that's
safe
correct.
statement?
I mean, I've been involved with pre-K for the past decade, and Ron asked me to join him as co-chair of this initiative, and it makes all the sense in the world. It's the right thing to do. We have a lot of violence, a lot of poverty in our community, and we need to put an end to that. And pre-K, the evidence shows, can solve a lot of those problems. And so this initiative, when he asked me about joining his team to co-chair it, was a natural for me, and I was glad he did. And now we're pushing the envelopes to try and get our elected officials and others to back this and make it a priority.
And it's going to happen, as Ron said, this is an issues thing. It's probably going to happen in Harrisburg, though. The funding will have to come from there.
We're just finishing the election phase where we sort of tried to build, and I have to say, you know, having Nick involved has been a terrific shot in the arm for the campaign.
He's been an advocate for this for a long time.
Because he's been advocating this for a long time.
Yes.
Actually, it was an op-ed that he wrote that inspired me to actually jump into the pre-K campaign to begin with. So it was easy for me to walk across the street and say, hey, Nick, why don't you join up as well? So that's the first part of the campaign, was through the election. Now we go through the budgetary process in Harrisburg in trying to convince state legislators and the governor that this needs to be a funding priority in order to give 3- and 4-year-olds that opportunity.
You've identified, and there's plenty of statistics, you've identified what the difficulties are in the numbers. For example, let's take Erie County. We're going to show you this in a graph form in a second. 62% of children in the county do not have access to high-quality pre-K. 28% of children in the county have access to publicly funded high-quality pre-K. There's a lot of discrepancy in these numbers. You got 62 and you got 38. You want to move the needle in favor of high-quality pre-K.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you convince people that education is so paramount at that young age?
Yeah, it's actually less difficult to convince people how important it is. It's more difficult to get the funding in place for it. I have spent a number of years going around and talking about this issue, and after I talked to a group of business leaders about how important pre-K education is to the future of our economy and our community, and to give these kids a chance, it's obvious to them that there's research and evidence behind it, and that it makes sense. The question is, how do we get there? And that is why we're here. And Pre-K for PA is an initiative to try and get the needle moving on funding. For some reason, somebody decided that school should start when you're in 1st grade, not even kindergarten. Yeah. We are lucky in this community to have full-day kindergarten for most of our students, but the problem is that most of the students are arriving at kindergarten unprepared.
Unprepared.
And that's challenging for the child, it's challenging for the teachers, it's challenging for the district. It becomes challenging for the community when these kids are incarcerated and costing the taxpayers money. And so it's a pay now or pay later. If we can pay now to get these kids into early childhood education programs, we avoid paying for those programs later in life that they're using because they weren't prepared for the life ahead of them.
It becomes, I think, quoted in the Erie Times News a little while back, that just an education issue, it's an economic issue because we want to get these people into structured learning. Being a former teacher myself, I can tell you that if they're not reading by 3rd grade and understanding concepts of math, that they just keep falling farther and farther behind as they go more through school until 8th, 9th grade is about the watershed year where they just go, I'm out of here. This is not working for me.
That's right.
That's right.
How did we get there, though? I mean, we sit up. 3 of us have more education you could probably stack to the moon.
That's that's sort of another interesting take on it, Phil. And that is that Pennsylvania, actually, we got off to an earlier start. And by the way, this is a bipartisan effort. I mean,
Absolutely.
This is not a blue state. This is not a red. This is not a right left. This is a policy initiative, a foundational element of education reform, getting on the right track. Nick talks about the investment. There's good science, sound economics behind this now. Pennsylvania was actually, with Governor Schweiker and then Governor Rendell, was sort of on the cutting edge there for a while. We kind of fell back, and we've kind of fallen behind. And the contiguous states around Pennsylvania are way ahead of us now.
Yeah.
I mean, take a state like West Virginia, which, love West Virginia, but West Virginia has outpaced us. They're educating right now 85% of their 4-year-olds have access to pre-K right now in West Virginia.
Well, how come
whereas we're only in Pennsylvania, we're only hitting 1/5. 80% of our kids in Pennsylvania don't have access to pre-K.
Why are they seeing the light?
Well, I mean, I think that's what we're trying to communicate to the legislature and the governor here in Pennsylvania, is that we need to catch up. We owe it to our communities, and we owe it to our future to really fully fund universal access to high-quality pre-K.
I think one of the challenges is that when people invest in something, they want to see a return, and they want to see it pretty quickly. I can tell you my mother-in-law lives in Philadelphia, and she is a 3rd grade teacher for 35 years and has recently just retired, but she told me that she can tell the students that had pre-K and the students that didn't. The students that don't have pre-K, she's often spending a heck of a lot more time with, trying to bring them up to speed and get them to understand their math skills and their reading skills. And it's taking away from the children that are actually prepared and doing well. And I think, this is such an obvious issue. I think when you talk about a return on investment, I think some of these legislators have a hard time investing in something if the return on the investment is out 5, 10, 15 years.
Or more.
They want to see a return on their investment today. And sometimes that's difficult. But the proof is in the evidence. And the evidence out there shows that these kids are more successful. They contribute to the community. They don't cost the community. And so it's somewhat of a no-brainer. We just have to make sure that it's a priority for our legislators and they realize it, and that the funding gets moved from, right now, the only line item in the budget that moves up every year are the jails.
Yep.
And we need to reverse that.
And a sad statistic I heard somewhere is that by 3rd or 4th grade, planners are already knowing that there's a certain, well, you guys talk about that.
That's true.
They're sizing prisons based on 3rd grade reading levels.
Yeah.
That's something that is sort of aggravating and concerning when you look at.
Say that again.
They look at the reading proficiency of 3rd graders, and based on that, they are sizing prisons. So they know that based on whether or not a child is performing well in 3rd grade, the chances of that person being incarcerated when they get out of high school, if they continue through high school, is much greater if their proficiency is less. And we can fix that by getting them to pre-K, because the evidence shows that in pre-K, you learn the foundation of reading. And up until 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn. If you don't know how to read when you're in 3rd grade,
well said,
then you're in trouble and you're behind.
A lot of discussion going around here, and you can enter into this discussion very easily by simply going to their website, which is called prekforpa.org. You are going to find a massive information there. can they get involved? What would they need to do to support your cause? Again, pre-K, and it's pre-K for FORPA.org. How can they help you?
Well, you know, again, this is an effort to persuade and to create the political will in Harrisburg to do what is necessary in order to rescue the system and provide universal access. So obviously making contact with your legislators. Now we happen to be fortunate that we have a group of legislators from northwestern Pennsylvania who are very supportive of pre-K, but there are other areas of our region of northwestern Pennsylvania where not everyone is necessarily persuaded that it's a top priority. Yeah. So we are working very hard in those regions as well to make sure that people are making contact with their legislators and that they're informed about the issue and that they're supporting it within their individual communities. But we have a superintendent of schools in Erie, and we have many educators and school board members who are very on board with this, very supportive of pre-K. So that's a very good story for us. And we have so many social organizations that are doing great work already in the space. So that's actually an advantage. But we know that by getting them access to language, literacy, math, socialization at an early age, it's going to save us money in special education. It's going to save us money in grade repetition. It's going to save us money in dropouts. They're going to stay in school longer. They're going to graduate. And they're going to go on to college potentially. And all of that is a return on investment. So that is it's not a spending program, it's an investment.
Is it fair to say then, or is it too early, what kind of dollar figure are we talking about?
You know, to get every kid in pre-K across the Commonwealth would be an expensive endeavor. There's no doubt about it. I don't know that we have an exact number of how much it would cost, but I think one of the things we have to do is stop spending money on the programs that are out there that aren't necessarily as efficient and good investments, and move that money into the pre-K.
It would be substantially less than we're spending on the totality of the corrections and the criminal justice system in this state. And it would, over time, have a significant impact on the continued incarceration of citizens, as we've already pointed out. So there's really a long-term domino effect in terms of the return on investment.
And it costs about $40,000 to $50,000 a year to incarcerate one prisoner in the Commonwealth.
I know that very well. And I'm talking locally. When you get to the state level, it ramps up.
And I mean, that's absurd. I mean, we're spending a whole bunch of money on defending these people, first of all, and then giving them room and board for 10 or 15 years because of their mistakes. And I think this is such an obvious issue that it's easy to talk about, and it's easy to convince people how important it is.
Well, because of the two of you, it's getting talked about. I can say that because they've put aside all their differences and anything else about whether you're a Browns fan or a Steelers fan. By the way, what are you?
Steelers.
Steelers and.
Steelers and Browns. I'll let them know that.
That's a problem.
Well, you walk that road nicely.
I think when you talk about the awareness of this, it's completely changed over the last decade. I remember speaking to groups about this, and they really had no idea what I was talking about, why I was talking about it. Now you have even the president, in his State of the Union address, making a point about how important early childhood education is. You have Destination Erie listing it as priority.
Priority.
And we're going to be hearing.
You're going to hear more about Destination Erie for sure.
And we're going to be hearing more from the president. The president's actually convening a meeting in December, and we'll be making some statements about pre-K and grants for pre-K. Yeah. I know some of the elected officials within Pennsylvania and the region will be going down for that. So I think that's going to be, very important, and it's going to help continue to build the momentum. There's someone else that. Another Erie native who's been very involved in this, who has really been spearheading this with Nick and I, is Kate Phillips, who really has been the architect behind our campaign, has done a terrific job in helping us shape this, and is now also very active at the statewide level.
I've heard this statement made, if I'm wrong, tell me, that pre-K is really the new first grade, or maybe even this new second grade. In other words, they're expected to know so much more when they come in, and if you don't know it, I don't have time for you. I have to deal with these people. You're holding us back. I'll say that again. Pre-K is really the new today's first grade or even second grade. So go ahead.
Well, the Common Core.
Go and riff on that.
The changes on the Common Core are making it much more difficult for our kids as it is today. And if we don't get more kids ready for kindergarten and prepared, it's like anything else. You wouldn't just take anybody off the street and put them in a job in a management position untrained. They have to go through a training program. Pre-K is that training program for the rest of their lives. And we're literally taking these kids out of their homes, which may not be the best, and putting them into a pre-K program, or I'm sorry, a kindergarten program, and they're unprepared. Pre-K oftentimes teaches these kids executive soft skills, so they know when to speak, when to raise their hand, what's allowed and not allowed in social settings. And that's half the battle when you get to kindergarten and first grade. These kids are out of control and they're not prepared. They've never been in a setting like a school setting before. And so, there's a lot that comes with this pre-K that isn't necessarily just learning about numbers and learning about colors. It's learning social skills too that are very important to these children's lives.
I'm looking at the map that we are West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, and New York. We're not really doing well compared to them, I don't believe. We're kind of, we're really down. But let me there's a two-part question here. Not only are we not doing well by the states that touch us, but as a country, we don't seem to really be doing well educationally. I mean, we don't value that, and you touched on it. We value other things, and then other countries come to us, get educated, and then take it back with them. Right. A lot of discussion.
As you well know, Phil, from your public service, that we have been a country that has been dedicated to mass education for our entire existence, beginning with the Merrill Land Grant back in the mid 1800s, which established the great state universities in this country. We've had an abiding commitment to that, but we're in danger really at this point, given the systemic problems that we're having throughout the system. We're in danger of becoming 19th century Britain. Where we have two systems of education. And I think one of the other points that needs to be made here is that not only is pre-K important as a foundational element, but it is also important because the concentration of children at the lower economic scales have access to more programs than those in sort of the middle cut. Kids at who come from families that have more income are getting their pre-K paid by mom and dad. There is a very broad section in the middle where you're working every day, but mom and dad, at the end of the month when they decide on the priorities for the family, can't necessarily afford pre-K. And so this plan really affects that broad group in the middle who would like to do it, but actually don't have the ability to do it.
I belong to the Early Learning Investment Commission. It was a commission that was put together by Governor Rendell and is continued on, and Betsy Bort locally is on that with me, along with Mike Plazzoni. And one of the things that we initiated along with the United Way and the Community Foundation was Erie's Future Fund. And Erie's Future Fund is a scholarship program that allows parents 300% of poverty, which is around $70,000 household income a year, to apply for a scholarship for their child to go to an early learning program. And it's been very successful. We send 300 kids a year or more to pre-K that otherwise might not have a chance to go. Right. And we're changing lives. We're talking to the parents and the grandparents who say, you know what, my child is so much better off because of that program. The other thing is we're going to be able to follow them now through their lives up into their school years to see how they're doing and how that affects them. So there are things that are taking place in our community for this initiative, but we really need at the state level to get this available to all kids.
I like what you're saying. I taught school, and the ones that I had in school that I thought were not going to turn out to be so well do turn out to be so well. But I can't tell that for another 20 years. Come on back when I'm 40-something or 30-something, because don't come back next September. You're not going to change that rapidly. Let me throw this down and see what you feel about this. There is a strong movement now that not everybody needs to go to college, that is just not on everybody's radar. And I do think this plays into the pre-K for PA, because there are people who need to, may I borrow your cup? Somebody needs to make this. Somebody needs to make this desk. Somebody needs to repair the cameras that you're watching us on. Not everybody's going to go to Yale and major in pre-Columbian art, which is fine.
Right.
Now, does that play into the pre-K for PA too?
Well, the reality is the pre-K for PA is talking about a time in a child's life when their brain is being developed. By the time they're 18 out of high school, their brain has been developed and they're making decisions on their own. What we want to do is create an opportunity for these children to be in a position so when they are 18, they're making good decision.
Good decision.
A great decision might be that they don't go to college and that they go into a technical program or something else. But here's the reality. 90% of the brain is developed by the time you're 6 years old. The most important,
Say that again.
90% of the brain is developed by the time you're 6 years old. Neurons are being created, and the same part of the brain that learns how to read and write and develop social skills is the same part of the brain that learns how to deal with stress and anxiety. If it's totally preoccupied with stress and anxiety because of issues at home, poverty, alcoholism, substance abuse, other things, it can't develop properly. And so the child is behind all the time. Science shows that you do not need to have a parent in the life of a child be there for them from a sense of learning. It doesn't have to be the parent. It can be a third party, like a pre-K teacher or a pre-K program. And so as long as these kids get into programs, they're finding that they are much better off in their lives in the future.
These two gentlemen, just before you hop in, Ron, these two gentlemen, I'm sure you can tell, they have done their homework. They know about what they're speaking. Nick, thank you so much, and Ron, thank you so much, because you really boiled it down to some statistics that hit home to everybody. Absolutely. You were going to say.
And I think the biggest, the best, training that I think anybody can have is having children. Because one of the things that you learn when, I have 3 daughters, and Nick has a nice big family. I know you do. One of the things you learn is that all kids are different. They have different strengths. They have different aptitudes, and the beauty of pre-K is that they will start with different strengths and needs, but they will end up at kindergarten ready to learn, hitting the ground. What I think is important about that is that it also allows them to get in the circle in kindergarten when they're self-actualizing, when they're realizing how they fit in, so that school and education becomes something that they fit into. Whereas if they get to kindergarten and they're outside the circle, and school becomes a reminder that they're not in the circle, and that sort of feeds that notion that I don't fit in and I got to go elsewhere to find my own sense of self-esteem. And I think that's part of what we're working at here, is to make sure that those language, literacy, math, socialization skills are in place by the time they get to kindergarten, so they're in that circle and they are along for the ride.
Funny you mention it. There's a song that's popular today, I Wish I Could Be Like the Cool Kids. Because I think what you're saying here is they're not of the cool kids. They're going to find their own meaning of cool, but it's not going to be always socially acceptable.
Right.
It's going to be off that way. Let me throw this one down. This is why they paid me the big bucks to ask you this. You got a terrible battle uphill because you're dealing with video, you're dealing with cell phones, you're dealing with texting, you're dealing with games that, you don't need any of what you're talking about, because I left my cell phone behind me. But how do you combat that? How do you say, look, this is okay and this is important, but this is really the most important stuff here. You want to drive toward that.
Well, I mean, when you talk about technology is a great way for kids to get in trouble. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for kids to make wrong decisions, and they don't even have to leave their bedroom, and it can hurt them for the rest of their lives. These pre-K programs will teach you about how to do the right thing in life. And kids make decisions as they get older. They get more responsibility and they make more their own decisions. And I always tell children when I speak to different groups in high schools and so forth that your character is created by the decisions you make. And if you're making decisions that are wrong or are illegal or don't make sense socially, then you're creating a character for yourself that is not a good one. And I think when you get kids into a program, a good pre-K program, they'll learn what's right and what's wrong. And they're all going to have a cell phone. They're all going to have an iPad at some point in their lives. They all have access to computers. And knowing the difference between right and wrong and the consequences of doing something wrong is very important. Those are the type of things you learn and when your brain is developing to make the right decisions.
Let me add to that. When I taught college, I would ask my students in advanced journalism to please read the newspaper. Nah, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to pick up their cell phone and read the Cliff's Notes version of the complicated subject, and I found that disarming. I said, but there's more to it than just doing that little small bit. I would hope that what you both are saying, and we're all hoping for here in this discussion, is that will help broaden that perspective. Be a reader for life. be a reader for life. You don't have to play Call of Duty for life. You can be a reader for life. You were nodding your head. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I agree, Phil. I mean, we deal with this challenge in our homes, all of our homes every day, because we have our kids that are, are focusing on the electronics. And but I think what Nick says is correct. It goes to judgment. And by the way, technology can be our friend in education if we allow it to be. It provides us with great leverage and a great opportunity. And I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of the learning curve of what it's going to take in order to make that, to strike the proper balance. And I think as parents we have to be ever vigilant of the intrusion of the electronic media and electronic communications into our homes.
Absolutely.
I think we just have to continue to be smart fathers and mothers and caregivers.
The people, the younger people today see what we're doing, television, as not being network or cable or whatever. They see it as television. They don't make a distinction. They've moved beyond what we've grown up with, or at least what I've grown up with. So what you're doing is good stuff, really good stuff. You were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think, Pre-K for PA is an initiative to spread the word about how important this is. I think everybody has an aha moment in their life. I was asked to, on behalf of the United Way 10 years ago, to go to Harrisburg to listen to Dr. Shonkoff from Harvard University. He talked about the development of the brain. And I'm watching him speak, and at the time I have a newborn, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I didn't realize how important this was. I left the meeting and immediately called my wife and told her to drop what she was doing and start reading to the kids. And that was sort of my aha moment. I think we need our politicians to kind of see this too, and our legislators to understand how important this issue is, so we can put it to the forefront and make it a priority.
All right, we got about less than 2 minutes left, so you get the last 45 seconds there, and then you get 45 on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered it, Phil. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for being here.
The 3 and 4 year olds don't get a second chance to be 3 and 4 years old.
And they don't vote either.
They don't get it, exactly. They don't get another chance to have that learning experience, whatever that magical moment might be, whatever that aha moment might be for them.
Quick question for both of you. If you had a chance to go back to high school, grade school, would you? Would you go back? I would.
That's a complicated question.
Because high school for me was just a good time. It was a good time. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Anyway, so I think that we have to be conscious of this opportunity for these children, and we really need to measure up, because it's a foundational element of education.
Time we stepped up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm here representing not only the community, but we've got a company with about 2,000 employees, and they all have children, and all those kids deserve a chance. Kids don't have a voice. 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, they don't have a voice, and so we have to be the voice for them. And I think it's, I think we've done them no good if we are putting them in a program to start school when they're in 1st grade. When they're 7 years old, the brain is 90% developed. It's too late at that point. This is a no-brainer. This is an initiative that we should all wrap our arms around and make a priority, and I appreciate you having us on.
Yeah,
thank you, Phil.
My pleasure. Thank you, thank you. Again, Nick Scott Jr., Vice President of Scott Enterprises, and Ron DiNicola, a lawyer and very much active in the Erie region for many, many years. Both of them co-chairing the Pre-K for PA Northwestern Pennsylvania campaign. Thanks for being with us. You can find this online, and they really need your support. This is a biggie. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, I'm Phil Fatica. Take care.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.